In 1896, a quiet suburb of Johannesburg was shaken by one of the biggest explosions the world had ever seen. A freight train, left standing in the summer heat, carried more than 60 tons of dynamite. When a locomotive bumped the wagons, the entire neighbourhood turned into a firestorm. The blast was so powerful, it carved a crater the size of a football field, destroyed thousands of homes, and was heard nearly 200 kilometres away. This is the forgotten story of the Braamfontein train explosion, a disaster so massive that, even today, it is remembered as one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in history. Braamfontein, meaning Blackberry Springs, is today a central district of Johannesburg, home to about 7,000 of the city's 957,441 residents, as recorded in 2011. But in the 1890s, Braamfontein was only a small suburb, grown from a farm of the same name, first mentioned in 1888. The site was 32 miles or 52 kilometres south of Pretoria and 60 miles or 96 kilometres southeast of Rustenburg. This region was rich in gold, and by the 1880s it had already seen a full-scale gold rush. Mines opened across the land, attracting thousands of people searching for fortune. Much of the mining in the area used explosives to break the rock that held the gold. This created a high demand for dynamite, which was brought in by special trains. On February 16, 1896, one such train arrived, carrying 8 freight cars loaded with a total of 60 tons of dynamite in 2,300 boxes. The train was pulled by a 40-ton class locomotive from the Netherlands South African Railway Company, or NZASM. The NZASM 40-ton class was a versatile steam locomotive introduced in 1891 and built in Germany by Maschinenfabrik Esslingen. It ran on 3 driven wheels and a single trailing wheel, designed for the narrow 3-foot 6-inch or 1,067mm Cape gauge track. On February 16, 1896, a freight train carrying 60 tons of dynamite in 8 cars arrived at Braamfontein station. The train ran on its regular schedule, but the mines didn't actually need the explosives yet, as their stockpiles were still full. To make room for other trains, station staff moved it to a siding just west of the station, waiting for a place to store the dynamite. By February 19th, storage space was ready, and workers began unloading the explosives. During this process, the train had to be moved further down the siding to make room for another incoming train. A shunting locomotive moved forward to push the train into its new position. But moments later, a massive explosion tore through the station, as if the earth itself had split in two. Sand and debris shot high into the air, and smoke and dust swallowed the site. When the cloud cleared, a giant crater lay in place of the station. 197 feet or 60 metres long, 164 feet or 50 metres wide, and up to 26 feet or 8 metres deep. The blast shattered every window in Johannesburg and could be heard 124 miles or 200 kilometres away. At least 75 people were killed, more than 200 injured, and around 3,000 lost their homes. The explosion left Braamfontein and nearby suburbs in ruins, forcing responders to arrive from distant areas and transport survivors to safety. The freight train's locomotive had been thrown into the air by the blast and was later found embedded in the ground at a 45-degree angle. At the time, the people witnessing it could not have known they were seeing one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. If there was ever a formal investigation into the explosion, its records have been lost to time. But the cause is clear: the explosives aboard the train. Traditional dynamite is highly unstable and can detonate without a controlled trigger. Invented in 1866 by Swedish chemist Alfred Nobel in Germany, dynamite was a safer, easier-to-handle alternative to black powder. Each stick is made of an absorbent material, often clay or diatomaceous earth, soaked in nitroglycerin and wrapped in paper for protection. A small explosive, called a blasting cap, is then inserted and connected to a detonator for controlled use. Freshly made dynamite is relatively safe, but problems arise when it isn't used quickly or is stored improperly. Over time, the nitroglycerin inside, a highly volatile liquid, can sweat out, pooling under the sticks, or soaking whatever containers they're in. Dynamite can also explode from blunt force. Tests show a hammer drop from just 8 to 10 inches or 20 to 25 centimetres can set it off, 4 times the height needed for pure nitroglycerin. Crystals of leaked nitroglycerin can also form on the surface of aging dynamite, making it even more sensitive to shock, friction, and extreme temperatures. The dynamite on the train at Braamfontein was probably fairly new, but it wasn't stored or handled properly. It had been transported in the summer heat of February and left in a siding for several days, allowing the explosives to heat up even more. When the shunting locomotive pushed the train, it delivered a powerful jolt, adding both shock and friction to the already unstable dynamite. This triggered a massive chain reaction, vaporizing the freight cars and sending the locomotive flying. The explosion didn't create an even larger crater because most of the dynamite's energy was able to escape sideways rather than downward. As a result, the force spread across the flat area as a deadly shockwave, destroying buildings and anything else in its path. Stories have circulated of people finding old boxes of dynamite in barns, lifting them and triggering an explosion just by setting the box down. Some accounts even suggest it may be harder to avoid setting off dynamite than it is to make it explode. Today, explosives are regularly transported by train, and most people wouldn't even notice. In the mid-20th century, some railways used brightly coloured cars with warning labels for explosives, but that practice has mostly disappeared. In North America, rail companies now usually require only a standard warning label, similar to those on cars carrying fuel or flammable gases. Some also prevent cars carrying explosives from being placed directly behind the locomotive, keeping them away from people and potential ignition sources. The Braamfontein disaster remains a stark reminder of the dangers of mishandling explosives, even if modern safety measures make such accidents far less likely. As you watch the remnants of this forgotten disaster, ask yourself, how do we balance industrial progress with human safety? And what other forgotten tragedies are hiding in history, waiting for us to remember them? Share your thoughts below.